Hello everyone. My name is Otávio Santana. I'm here. I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about Jakarta NoSQL, this kind of thing. But today I'm not a speaker. But before, let's talk about X6. X6 technology company that does consult service, especially here in Europe. And if you want to know more about us, please go to our website, so xgeeks.io, where you can get several information about us. Also, uh, details, some posts about technology, and so on. So, if you want to know more about Xgeeks, please follow us on Twitter as well. And that is it. But today is not a day to talk about Xgeeks, right? Let's talk about Jakarta NoSQL with Mitchell. Hello, Mitchell. How are you today?
Good, good. How are you? Thanks for having me come speak to the group today.
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. So, hopefully everything's okay, right?
Yeah. So,
Oh, nice.
ready
Please,
to go?
the stage is yours, and you can
Okay,
start.
great. Well, again, thank you for asking me to come speak today. I'm coming to you live from Clinton, New Jersey. That's out on the western part of New Jersey, not too far from Pennsylvania. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and, okay. Okay, so
Okay,
I'd like to
that's
talk to you today about Jakarta NoSQL and MongoDB.
okay, but
Um,
you're not sharing your screen, okay?
oh,
Just
not,
to
no,
know yet.
not
But
yet.
yes, wow. You
No,
say
okay,
that
I
you're
must
gonna
put that.
mix
Yeah, there we
between
go.
Java
Okay,
and most NoSQL database?
you have to. There we go. At least do
Yes,
that.
right
Okay,
now.
sorry about that. I always keep forgetting there's a second step here. So, all right. So again, this is the title today. And who is this Mike Redlich character? So I work for ExxonMobil Research and Engineering here in Clinton, New Jersey. That's what the Petrochemical Research Organization means. Um, but during my off hours, I do a lot of work in the Java community. I write for InfoQ in the Java news space, and I've been running a Java group for the last 20 plus years. And I'm also on the leadership council of the Jakarta EE ambassador. So that takes a lot of my time when I'm not here at work. All right, so the objectives I'd like to have for today is what is Jakarta NoSQL? What is Eclipse JNoSQL? Talk about some NoSQL database types. Talk about the different layers of Jakarta NoSQL, and then I think the best part that everybody enjoys, including myself, are the demos, and look at some actual source code and interact with the MongoDB database. And at the end, we'll have some NoSQL resources. Okay, so Jakarta NoSQL. So it is one of the Jakarta EE specifications. There's just about 30 of them, maybe not quite. And of course, our gracious host today, Otávio, is the specification lead. And the specification itself streamlines the integration of Java applications with all the various NoSQL databases. And also defines a set of APIs that provide standard implementation for most NoSQL databases as well. Also, too, you'll see in the documentation, it's one API, many databases. And I'm happy to be part of adopting the specification. For those of you who may not know, all the specifications encourage Java user groups to adopt one or more specifications. And so it's the Garden State Jug and also, I think, Sujava are the two user groups that adopt it. So we have contributed in some way, shape, or form. And that's part of what we do for adopting the specification by itself. So we're happy to be part of that. So Eclipse JNoSQL. And what that is basically the compatible implementation of Jakarta NoSQL specification. So, compatible implementations, as you might know, for Jakarta EE, with Tommy Tribe and Apache, Tommy Tribe, Apache, Tommy, and IBM, Open Liberty, and so on. But each of the specs actually have their own individual compatible implementations. There is one defined API for each of the different database types, and we'll talk about those types in a little bit. And the intent of this specification was to also provide some familiarity for Java developers who are used to using the annotations in JPA and such. So you might recognize some of those when we go through the examples. So there are 4 different database types, and we'll talk about all of them in a little, one by one. So you can see the 4 of them right there. So column family, data is stored in cells grouped in columns of data rather than rows of data. And they can also be logically grouped into column families. So, yeah. So, sorry, I have to look at my notes. So the main advantage of storing data in column is over relational DBS is their fast search and access and data aggregation. And some of the use cases that you might want to use one of these particular NoSQL types is content management systems, blogging platforms, and so on. And the examples of some of these types are Cassandra and Apache Hadoop. And comparing the column family NoSQL to relational, so you'll see for all 4 of these, you'll see the left side of the table the same. Everybody's familiar with table, row, columns, and any kind of relationships. So in a column family, a table is synonymous, to the column family itself, and a column is related to a row, and then a key value pair is what referred to as a column. So it's pretty much almost orthogonal to what you're used to in a relational database setup. Next is document database, and this is similar to key value, but there is a unique primary key, and the data itself, the values, are basically stored in JSON format. In the case of MongoDB, it's their own binary JSON format, as you can see right there. Okay. And examples, of course, is MongoDB, and I forget what else at the moment, but oh yes, and Apache CouchDB and Elasticsearch. So comparing it to RDBMS, you have a collection is a table. It's synonymous to a table. Document is synonymous to a row, and the key value pair is synonymous to a column. And there's a link as far as the relationship is concerned. Next is graph, and so this is basically built on a model known as entity, attribute, and value. Okay, and all the entities, as you can see, are referred to as nodes, as you see here with Apollo and Aries. And each the nodes store data about each entity in the database itself. Okay. So, and have the relationships, as you can see there. There's a little bit, it's hard to see here, but there is a relationship among all 3 of these here, besides this one. And some of the graph databases are Neo4j, MongoDB, and OrientDB. And because we're really like a graph, like a regular, graph theory itself, there's vertices and edges, and you can see the relationships between, the graph NoSQL databases and relational databases itself. And then last but not least, you have key value, and this is the simplest of all 4. It's basically, very, just a simple, like you would see in a config file, for example. And this one has the greatest scalability. And basically, it's the relationship there is a bucket is synonymous to a table and a key value paired to a row. So just as a disclaimer, I've not worked with any of the other three other than document databases. So what I'd like to do is to basically upgrade my example to include at least one more of these type of databases. But so we're going to focus, of course, on MongoDB. Okay, any questions so far?
Oh, no questions.
Okay. So you may have seen in the early days of the specification, the communication layer was formerly known as Diana, and the mapping layer was formerly known as Artemis. So you may see some of that in some of the dependencies and the POM files and so on. So you can see the relationship among all four database types here. And you have the mapping and the communication layer here. And this one says Artemis, this one says Diana. I really need to clean these up, but try to get them a little bit better or recreate them. It's kind of hard with the black background, right? So, but you get the idea. And the communication layer in itself is the set of APIs that obviously defines communications, to communicate with the database itself. And each of the database types are represented in this layer. And you can compare this to the JDBC APIs in the relational database world. JDBC, of course, I thought was very, very easy to implement back in the day. In the mapping layer, of course, this is where you would map Java objects to the NoSQL databases, and it incorporates the Jakarta context and dependency injection and the Jakarta bean validation specifications. It is annotation driven, and you can compare this to JPA or an ORM like Hibernate and so on in the relational database world. Okay. All right, scalability versus complexity. And I mentioned earlier that key value is very, very scalable. The x-axis, in case you can't see that, is complexity, and the y-axis is scalability. So yes, very little complexity, very high scalability on key value. And then, of course, graph, because of the fact that it uses its graph theory, essentially it is, scalability is not so high on that and been very complex. So there are a number of NoSQL databases that are supported by this, and you can see the entire list there. So even Redis is in there, and Elastic, and there are some I've never heard of. I've seen references to Tinkerpop, but a lot of these I'm not familiar with. I wrote up a news piece on Skilla a couple of years ago. I think that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, so that's. Oh, and there's Hazelcast. I guess that's the IAM intermediate data grid. Yeah. So, all right. I feel like I've did this too quick. So, but anyway, let's go to the live demo. So we'll spend some time on that. All right. So I have an application, and of course, I'm a huge craft beer enthusiast. And so, of course, a lot of my examples have to do with beer. Hey, why not, right? So I have a MongoDB database, and look at it in Compass here. So, so one collection is, just for beer itself, and you'll see the various types. I capture the name of the beer, the kind it is, all right, whether it's an ale, IPA, stout, etc. The ABV, the alcohol by volume. And then there's a brewer ID, which corresponds to the next collection. So you see that I have in there, right? So, and being a self-proclaimed, beer snob, I actually did put in Budweiser and Michelob Ultra. But I guess most of you are in Europe, so you guys are used to having good beer over there. So.
Yeah, we do.
Well, thankfully the microbrews came about 10 years ago, so we do have our share of good beer around here. And then the brewers or the brewer collection basically has, the name of the brewer, the city and state in which it's located, and one of the I think would be nice too is to have the URL in here, but that's an exercise for another day. So you can see I have 13 at the moment. We're going to add a couple more during this demo, which I already have set up. So first we're going to, also there's config that's part of this application, so the microprofile config. All right. So basically you, give basically, all these different attributes here. So we have DB1, the database, we call it BeersDB, which obviously corresponds to this, right? And then of course the port for running MongoDB, which is always 27017 by default. And then the database provider is, as you see here, Eclipse JNoSQL Diana. Okay, there's the communications layer right there, and that's what you would use for a MongoDB database. You could, if you'd like, and I have another example that has a second database. I think that's from Ottavio's God's database, right? And but you could do something like db2 equals db2, and then provide the actual, the same properties. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. And then, of course, depending on what database you use, you would actually use the correct, provider on that. So we can close out that. And with the mapping, all right, so we have beer corresponding to the beer collection and brewer corresponding to the brewer collection. And just it's pretty much a POJO with some other things in it, okay? And so you were using the entity, the entity annotation, and of course, ID and column, just like you would in JPA, very, very similar. So you would actually define out your, map everything to your collection in there. And so then I have a default constructor. We have the primary constructor, right? Pretty straightforward, all the getters. Of course, I could upgrade this to Java 16, right? We don't have to worry about any of that. But that's another exercise for another day. And thanks to Ottavio, he actually set me up with creating builder classes for here. And so this is all his work. So thank you again for that, Ottavio. Appreciate it. You'll see how that's used in a few minutes. And similarly with the brewer, exactly the same thing. Default constructor has just some default values in it. All right, getters and setters. And I hope you guys can see that. Just remember to expand that a little bit. Okay. All right, so that's that. Okay. Now, let's get into some other stuff here too. So we have repositories and service for each one. Oh, I want to show you beer type. This is very simple. It's an enum, and you can see basically it captures all the different beer types. Okay. We'll have a service class here. Okay, we're going to use services and in the application or the repository itself. We'll use both of these methods. And I create a beer repository and a brewer repository, and then just getter methods for that. Okay, so that's we'll see how that's used in a little bit. Okay. There's a manager producer, where here's the config property that we defined in the properties file. There's DB1, right? And you would have in there a embedded document collection manager So we're going to call it beer doc. Okay, you can call it whatever you like, of course, you know. So I have a corresponding each one, you know, for each collection. All right. And, you know, it takes a database type document. Similarly, for the other database types, there are those, you know, enumerations defined for key value column and for graph. No. Okay. So let's get into the beer repository. Okay. And this, yeah. There we go. So this is, you would obviously extend the NoSQL mapping repository class, or I'm sorry, interface. And then you would actually have your find by name and find by brewer ID in this case. And we're returning a list that will capture a beer, and we're passing into it a beer type. And I have a delete by ID. I have that that code commented out, which is why this is gray at the moment in the main application. Okay, so we can define those you know, declarations of those particular methods. So in the repository, you know, it is all the find by methods, you know, depending, and also delete by and et cetera, and it's all in the documentation. And same thing with brewer. We only have one. We're only going to find your brewer by name, but of course you can add more depending on your application. Then we have the service. And so in the repository, these are generated in the background. All right. In the beer service, you're actually, you know, defining these yourself. All right. And we do a find by name in this beer service here. We're using the built-in document query, which is here as part of Jakarta NoSQL. And there's a select method. And, you know, and so we're using streams here. So, you know, from, so select, so very, you know, very much like SQL, right? Select from beer where name is equal to the name being passed in here. And then your terminator method is build. And then you can return the template type, which is here. This is a document template, which is part of the specification. Okay. And similarly for brewer ID, it's very much, you know, the same kinds of streams. So, you know, this is very easy to, you know, it's kind of funny to use SQL, like as in relational databases, you know, for a NoSQL database. So this is another instance of how you can attract, you know, some of the folks from the relational world into the NoSQL world, if, you know, if people choose to try to experiment with that. And the service is very same, you know, for finding by name. Okay, same thing. We're going to select from brewer where the name equals name. Oh, and here's an insert method, and I forgot to mention that earlier. We're going to use the insert method that's part of the document template class itself. I think that's it. Yes. Okay. So now on to the main application, but maybe I'll stop here for a minute and ask if there are any questions.
Hello, everyone. That's a nice opportunity to fire your question. So if you have any doubt, curiosity, and just want to know more, please raise your hand, put your questions, and that's why we are here.
Yeah. All right, everything's good? Okay. All right, so here comes the main application. Okay, we'll go through this a lot here, but oh, there was logging in the original example, but I decided to just do system out print lines over here. So, all right, so what we're going to do is actually we're going to use the SE container. That's for, for a Java SE container. So we'll just build that right away. And then here's our service class that I showed you earlier, right? And then you take the container and then do a select from the service class, and you get that. Okay, so then we have the service going. Now we're going to define our different repositories, the beer repository and the brewer repository, using the service methods here, right? So we'll get those. If you recall, then they were in the getter methods here, so that's where that comes into play. All right, and that's the repository. And then we can use the container, or instance of our container, to actually get a beer service or a brewer service. So you can use either one of these. We don't have to use both. I just wanted to show that there's more than one way to do this kind of thing. And one of the things I'd like to do is, I'd like to get the number of documents in the particular collection, and then be able to dynamically put it in here. So right now I have to go and I'll say, oh, all right, how many do we have in here? We have 13, I think it is. Yep, 13. So this is the 14th one we're going to insert into the database. And again, this is where the builder classes come in that I showed you earlier, because I think this is kind of cool to be able to do it this way. All right. So with ID, and these correspond, of course, to, let's see, where is it? Brewer, where are you? There it is. Okay. Here's the different methods here using, in streams right here. So that was how that was. I mean, you can do it the more traditional way too. So again, it's just another way of doing things. But I think this is, a little bit clearer, and you can organize it a little bit better. There is a great brewery right down the street from here, only about 2 or 3 miles away, called Sunken Silo, and that's in Lebanon, New Jersey. I've been there a few times. It has gluten-free varieties for my wife, so we do go there from time to time. So again, the ID, the name, the city, the state, and then the build. And then we're using the brewer repository, and we're saving it using the save method with the name, with the variable sunken. And then similarly with conclave, that's, I'm sorry, this should be, let's change that. Copy and paste is evil, so. Okay, this is a great brewery in New Orleans, Louisiana. For many of you may have been there. This is only about 3 or 4 years old, so it's a great place, for great craft beer down there. And then, so we'll do the same thing. Now we're using the insert method that I showed you earlier, and that is brewer service. There it is. So there's the insert method right there, using the template. Okay. So, all right, and then we'll do that right there. So this is under construction. This is a document template type. I ran into some issues with that, and I hadn't had a chance to go back and take a look at that, but that's another way of being able to get a document template type. So that's work to do. So here comes a whole series of system out printlns over here, where we're going to find a brewer by name first. All right. So okay, we'll take a look at Anheuser-Busch. That's already in the database. All right. And then that'll put that out there. And then so we should actually do this. Let me take that back here. And there's a reason why I did that. I updated everything this morning, and this one I forgot. So Urban South Brewing. So in this case, I am getting the ID of the brewer itself. So we'll find the brewer by name, right? We'll do that, right? And we'll put it out on the screen. And then we'll obtain the brewer ID. Okay, and then so corresponding to this, there's the get method, get ID. And then, of course, the brewer ID is what we'll just put on the screen. So, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to add in two different beers related to Urban South Brewing. And I already have those in there as well. And again, I have to manually put in the, the primary key for these. So we'll do the same thing here, using the builder method here, and then the Who Dat Golden Ale and the Snowball Juice, both of which I've had. They're very delicious, and same thing. And the ABV, I found it interesting that when I looked it up on the website, it's 5.04, a second significant digit. I thought that was kind of funny. And then the other one is an IPA called Snowball Juice. So those of you who are not familiar with the South, they have their ice cream. It's not ice cream cones; it's a water ice type of thing. They call them snowballs down there. So, all right, and that's a 7% alcohol. And then this one does the brewer repository, and this one does the beer service insert. So again, doing two different ways of inserting into the database. And then we're going to find a beer by name. And I have, this is Pumpkin by Southern Tier in upstate New York. And so we'll find that by name in the database, and it should exist. And then we'll find varieties of brewer by the brewer ID. So we've already captured that earlier. So in theory, it should capture the new, the newly created beers that we're going to put into this database once we run this. And if you want to delete, and we could try this at some point. We can delete, and this does work. When I test this stuff, I don't want to delete things out of the database. All right, so we're ready to run this. This is where I like to see everybody's hand go up. All right, so we'll have to do an MVN clean compile. Okay, and let's see. And then we'll execute it that way. See if I can make this a little bit bigger too. There we go. Let's do this first. Okay. Oh no. Ugh, what happened there?
Could you increase your font a little more?
Oh, yes. I copied, I should have, yeah. Okay. How's that? Okay, I think that, let's give that a shot here. All right. All right, everything seemed to go well. Let's take a look at everything here. Of course, what would be really cool is to have a RESTful web application here, right? All right, so basically the first output, we're finding a brewer by name, all right? We found Urban South, that's the one I told it to get, and it puts out the ID and city and state, and we're obtaining the brewer ID, which was 15, and we're adding 2 new beers. And then we find a beer by name. So we added the 2 new beers, right? So we didn't look for them yet. Oh, let's find out here. Let's take a look. Let's do that. So indeed, you have seen this updated right here. There's 15, and there's Sunken Silo and Urban South. And we should have added those 2 beers in there. Yep, and we have here Who Dat Golden Ale and the Snowball Juice, and the brewer ID is 15 for that, right? So everything worked well. Going back to the output, so I told it before, find a beer by name, and it found Pumpkin, right? The brewer ID is 1, and which corresponds to Southern Tier. And then we found the different varieties by brewer ID, and of course, if I had any others of this brewer ID would have been included in this list. Okay, so it definitely found those 2 new ones and then put them out on the screen right there. So, So yeah, so there's so many different ways you can, do a number of things with your database application. This is just, essentially just scratching the surface. So that's pretty much it on that. If you want to try, we can actually, we have time, right, Otavio? But, what do you want to do?
Yes,
Okay.
we have time as much you want.
All right, let's delete the last one there, number 9. All right. Always put it back in later. All right. Yeah. Okay, but then we want to actually not put in anything anything in there. So we'll just take those out for now. Okay. That should be good. All right. We're not going to put anything into the database. Okay. And we could I'll just keep it the way it is here. So, all right. All right. So let's run this. Let's go do. Oh, I didn't put any kind of output, but we'll see it. Okay. So when we go back to here, we should see number 9 is gone, indeed. Okay. So it did that. You can always add it back in another time. So that's okay. Any questions on the application itself?
No, there's no questions.
Did I put everybody to sleep, or so, that's the one thing I
Anyway,
miss
that
about.
was
What's
an amazing presentation. Yes.
Well, I'm not quite done yet, but this is what I miss about in-person presentations, because you can actually see who's just watch everybody's reaction if they look confused or if they're totally engaged,
Yes.
those kinds of things, so hopefully we're going to go back to in-person meetings for the Java group at some point, but
Yeah, hopefully as soon as possible. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, just wanted to talk about the current status of Jakarta NoSQL and Otavio. Please, if there's any updates, let me know. So this, if you look at the Jakarta EE website under the specifications, this is considered in development at the moment. And current version is 1.0. I guess that's beta 3. And then at the time, I know Otavio was to migrate to JDK 11 after their Jakarta EE 9.1 was released. Is that still true, or? Otavio?
Oh, sorry, my mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. All right. So yeah. So what else is there? Oh yeah. So here's some resources here. This presentation and the GitHub repository are available right now. I'll show you how to get there in a little bit. But then some of the resources here. There was a news by InfoQ by one of the other editors back in 2019. I guess that's October. You can check that out. The specification itself can be found in that top URL. And the YouTube video, I think, and I didn't double check this, Otavio, I think that might have been you and someone else, but it is related to Jakarta NoSQL. And then Bail Dong has, he's got some great blog entries on how to do, implement various things. So he had one on Jakarta NoSQL, which is good. So that's just a, just a scratch of, scratching the surface of what's available out there. But if you want to get involved, please contribute. And one of the first things to do is to, fork the NoSQL repository, and you can see the URL there, and get started by contributing to documentation or, anything like that. That's what I've started doing already. And I hope to do, to get more, especially in code, and move this specification forward. I know with Jakarta EE10, the planned release is in like the first quarter of next year. So I don't know. What do you think, Otavio? Would we make 10 or?
Yes, that's the good questions. And hopefully 10.
Yeah.
And as you saw, right now we have Jakarta configuration that I'm also the committer of the product.
Oh, okay.
And the main goal is to, instead of use microprofile configuration, start to use Jakarta configuration. As soon as we have that, we can say, yeah, the product is done, ready to go.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I remember that was a new proposed specification. I think Dmitry Kornilov, I know, kicked that off, right? So you're part of that too. So
yes,
awesome.
I am.
Yeah, awesome. That's cool. So yeah, please, if you guys want to get involved, and ladies, if you want to get involved, in contributing, this is it'd be nice to move this forward. I think MVC was. Was just more recently part of Jakarta EE, I think in 9 or 9.1, I forget which, but yeah. So excuse me. And oh yeah, and of course, Otavio and I had I don't know how many, at least 5 Zoom meetings over the last number of months to go over a number of things, just to get me up to speed and everything. So thank you. Appreciate all your time with that. I'm sure we'll have more. But anyway, yeah. So thank you, Otavio. And so contact info. It's my email, of course, my Twitter handle. Just as a warning, there are political rants on there, if you don't mind that. Otherwise, it's IT. Cats and anything else useful. But my own personal website is redlich.net. You can find this presentation and others in the portfolio section, and the source code is in my GitHub repository right there. So, yeah. So take a look at all that if you're if you have some time or interested, and would appreciate any feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. I always appreciate if I'm missing something or could do better on various things. So it's all about us working together, and I think that's what's great about the Java community. So, and other than that, it's time for some cervezas. It is too early for me at the moment because I am at work. I don't think they'd appreciate that if I started indulging right now. So, but I appreciate your time. I didn't think it would go this fast, but again, I always enjoy talking about this kind of stuff. So, any questions before I stop sharing my screen, or something to go over on the source code? Nothing? Okay.
Oh, come on. I was mute the whole time. Come
Were you?
on.
Oh.
Yes.
Sorry.
That's why I hate technology. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. That was an amazing presentation. I totally agree with you, Lucas. He was well prepared. Yes, he is awesome. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks again for everything. Take care.